Okay, this is the second game of the Congress. Played today, this morning, and we're playing as black. So thought develop the knight out on the queen side just to see what they're going to do. So they did push through, so we push through with the pawn blocking, and I thought this was an aggressive move, you know, this pawn attacking down on this side here. So I thought, well, I'm going to do an attack for an attack to see if I can get a redress in my own personal psyche in the game. And then they went for a sort of, felt like a timid little pawn push, and I thought, okay, that's fine, that works for me. So we can do timid too, opening up our dark square bishop. They developed their knight, not too aggressive, so I thought, well, let's keep the attack going. Okay, so their moment of tiny timid movement, I wanted to exploit to really say, well, okay, we want to be in attack mode. Part of our mantra, our ethos, our concept is to attack, attack, attack where possible, and to remove the pieces from the board that we're attacking strategically. So they started attacking, capturing. So we captured back, nice and simple, straightforward. The knight can't take because we have the pin through with the bishop onto their king. They developed the bishop, developed the knight, looking for king safety now, getting castled. So they beat us to the tempo in terms of castling king safety. So I'm feeling at this moment I'm sort of one move behind, and I'm trying to gain an advantage in time. So we captured the knight. As we said, we really want to capture strategically. I don't want to waste our time placing our pieces on squares and then keeping that tension, or placing our pieces on pieces and just keeping that tension. We want to do something active. So we captured, and then they captured. Brought the knight through now, attacking the pawn here because it's got no protection on it at the moment, so it seemed like a simple attack. As you can see, the gauge bars showing white as advantageous at this moment in time, and we look to then support the knight with the rook. So that was pretty straightforward again. And then they're in attacking the b pawn with the rook this time. So we bring the knight through, defending the knight, the pawn. I was conscious that the knight is on the rim and all that sort of stuff, but it's not always the case that a knight on the rim is dim. It's only dim really if there's a pawn or something that can actually come down and trouble it. At this moment in time, there is no pawn there. That pawn has gone, so could quite freely bring this knight here to defend. It could stay there forever and a day because there's nothing that's going to trouble it. Obviously the bishop may do if it wanted to. So they captured. I was surprised at that because normally people treasure the bishops and they don't want to take pieces with the bishops. They want to control the diagonals. So I was a bit shocked at that, so we took with the rook. Brought the rook back in readiness for potential doubling up. We did have the idea of their dark square bishop potentially attacking through onto our rook, having a nice little skewer type thing onto the queen as well. So we were aware of that situation. And as we saw this pawn push down, we realised that's exactly what they were going to do. So first of all, we wanted to support our knight, but also give it a nice little flight square, whether or not it wanted to come back or to basically move into this square here for a lovely outpost. So there's a number of things that's going on at this moment in time. I'm not too bothered about these pawns here that he's got coming towards the F, G and H side. And they push down, so the head of the snake usually it gets wiped out eventually, and that's why I tend not to bother doing these types of moves. So it looks good, it looks aggressive, but I really didn't lose any sleep over it. What I was losing sleep over was the fact that I may lose tempo if I don't get this right, because this pawn now is supporting any attack that this pawn can do to block the dark squared bishop, and I believe that was their strategy. So in my head I was thinking I need to move either my rook or my queen out of that position. So I moved the queen, and yes, they did come down, so we could move the rook back nicely. So in my heart of hearts I was saying to myself now, well, the attack that they believe is coming down onto our king side, it didn't look like it had much of a strength to it in terms of pieces supporting pieces and having a direct attack per se, which I supported, because it's a dark square bishop, so it can't like follow an attack or support an attack from the queen. The rooks would have to do a massive rook rover to get involved in the game on that side. All the while we do have our knight that can potentially attack this pawn here that's got no protection on it. So we moved the knight, attacking the pawn that's got no protection on, and I sat there and wondered why he didn't go and protect that pawn. He's moved his queen over to the far side, and was he worrying about something else? So we captured the pawn, also attacking the rook. So attack for an attack, and the rook then decides to actually attack the knight. The knight brings itself back, attacking another unprotected piece, which is the pawn. Queen comes down and supports stealthily. So that gives us a moment to attack this bishop just to get it out of the way a little bit. He moves back, and I think I took a bit of time to actually make this maneuver. Was it 40 something seconds, is it? No, not 40 seconds. 0.9, yeah. To make this move. So I thought, if we can get rid of these pawns on this side, we will have a better strength and control, because the opponent's looking to control and attack on our king side. As I said, it didn't really seem to have much meat on the bones there, so we needed to establish an open file of our own and get rid of these pawns that supporting these two pawns that think they're coming down to do some damage. I didn't see any threats at this moment in time, so this is why I decided to push on to this pawn. I felt that was a weaker pawn, because if he does take, then we take back and it opens up space towards his king area. So they brought the rook supporting, but we captured anyway. And now we've got a nice open file for our rooks. As we know, rooks like the open files. All simple, straightforward stuff. Bring the knight through now, attacking the rook. Plans of actually going to this lovely outpost here, this lovely post here, just to sit there to be an annoying knight. Nothing can take it from there. It'd have to sacrifice itself. The rook attacks, and then we bring the knight nice and cosily into this spot here. So now all the activity and the strength in my head, I felt was really strong coming from us, in terms of now we're going to work our pieces together to try and challenge his pieces towards his king area, and hopefully his pieces go backwards. He didn't go backwards with his queen, he's come forward, and I'm thinking, well, what does he actually want to do with this? So if I'm actually saying what does he want to actually do with this, I believe there's nothing there. There's nothing for me to worry about. I bring my rook up now, and the reason why is the only worry that we had, and the only worry that we even had to think about, was because he's brought his queen here, he's looking at either pushing this pawn down. Our pawn can't take, because the queen is in line here. He's looking also for the bishop maybe to come here. Our knight can take, but then the pawn can't take back. So there's an imbalance there in their attack process. So it's a single attack which is easily circumvented by this rook move coming here and being able to take whatever thinks it's coming into this space. So when I saw this pawn move giving his king a flight square, I knew we were doing something right. So that gave me a little bit of confidence to then push onto the pawn, blocking off the dark square bishop's activity. And we expected this pawn pushing down. We did have options, but I felt safer just bringing the queen here. And the rationale behind that was, if this pawn was to go, we do have like a line of sight with the queen attacking the king. Smallest of potatoes, but it could work. We were also looking at potentially attacking the rook here and then doubling up. So we've got line of sight for a lot of activity going on. Now this move did actually throw me completely. I thought this guy's in the OTB rating is a lot higher than me, so I don't understand why that move was made. It's not really attacking anything that is not protected. I would have thought it would have gone here, losing itself, thinking that this was unprotected because the queen is protecting there. So I did sit and wonder for a bit why that move was made. So I continued with doubling our rooks up, and then he brought his rook down, and his rook was coming down pawn hunting this pawn here. So all that activity to actually attack a pawn. So I suppose in a way they're thinking if they can get rid of that pawn, then they can get rid of the knight because the queen is on the knight. But they lose a bit of tempo, they lose a bit of timing, they lose a little bit of it's the timing thing, and I wanted to try and win some time in this game, and playing as black you're always sort of wanting to win a little bit of time because you're one move behind all the time, and I think this one move gave me that time back. So the king goes into the corner. So now the rook is basically looking for activity coming towards their king area, also looking for this other rook to come and get supported here, and going for like a simple checkmate thing on the back here, if it's allowed. But if you notice this key square here, queen putting a check on, and I had lovely sights of the queen coming here, as I mentioned before. Now it's blocked, so if we did put the check on, the bishop maybe comes, and then either the queen or the knight takes the bishop. I'll probably take with the queen just to get the big guns off the board. Knight takes, and depending on what actually happens, if he's got a rook at the back, then we can go for an exchange of some sort. So that was the sort of picture I was building up in my head. And they bring their rook back, so at this point I'm thinking this might be the opportunity to do it. I did take a long time over this move. So we did put the check on, and we took with the queen, and I think the evaluation said that taking with the knight was probably better, and it probably is, because there's an element of winning a rook, I think. So I think if the knight takes, if the queen then decides to take, then we take here, then we take there, then we're actually a rook up. Whereas the way that I did it, I took with the queen took, knight took, and then the rook took our rook, and then I took with our knight. I'm happy being a knight man, I like knights, but for a split moment I was kind of shocked, because I thought, oh, that's not the way that was supposed to work. I was supposed to have two rooks, not a knight and a rook. So I quickly changed my mindset and just confirmed in my head, look, I do have a minor piece up, so let's make it work for us. So we come down, we're attacking a pawn, so attack as best possible. King comes down, attacks, we attack again, and we're attacking another pawn. The rook takes, and we attack the rook, but also we're blocking this pawn, this advanced pawn. Comes down to attack, and we bring the king into action now, supporting the knight. And they bring the pawn down. So at this stage here I'm thinking, well, I do have an extra piece, and I want my knight to be as effective as possible. It's done a grand job, it's grabbed two pawns already, and it's given us an advantage with pawns across the board. So if we did take this pawn off, then the rook takes, our king can come here blocking this pawn, and then he's going to have to contend with all these other pawns that we've got, and we have a free rook to run riot all over. And again, I did take a while over this particular move. I thought, well, you know, I've got advantage, why can't I just dance around with it? I says, no, look at what it's done. It's peeled off two pawns, it's ready to peel off another pawn now, so like 3 pawns for a knight, you can't go wrong. So we grabbed, and they grabbed, and we brought the rook up just to stop the rook from coming back down to attack the pawn here. and then the opponent resigned. And to me, that was a fantastic victory. More so for the fact of seeing these small openings, but the simplicity of seeing these opportunities. They weren't grandiose or grandmaster openings or movements or anything or strategies that were being used. These simple moves that came together quite nicely for me. And I remember years ago I couldn't play like this. I could make the moves and stuff, and then I'd always wonder why I was a pawn down. That was one of my nemesis. It's just being a pawn down in games and then losing by a pawn, and I just beat myself up saying I lost by a pawn. Yeah, and I had a fantastic game. I'd done the attacking, I'd got all the positions, and then I end up losing by a pawn. So I'm trying to circumvent that behaviour, because that was a key stage thing, and it stuck with me, and it's still stuck with me now, losing by a pawn when you've played a fantastic game. So yeah, really pleased with this game. So this was the second game in the tournament, so we're now 1.5 out of 2 at the moment. So on to the next games.